At this point, Gwen Stacy has died far more often than she has lived. She has probably died more frequently in more mediums than any other character in fiction. That could be hyperbole. She's gotten to live more in more recent years as one of the stars of the Spider-Verse films and multiple comics now bearing her name. But it was a long and bumpy road to get to that place, when she started out as a living plot device who ultimately existed merely to die. Now, the same could be said for Peter Parker's Uncle Ben, who also bites the bullet in every adaptation of the classic story. He doesn't get to be his own Spider-Person most of the time, but it's Gwen that people have connected to more in recent years. And her experiences living as a hero now contrasts completely with her old history of constantly dying. And even when she's not there, Gwen holds a lot of strange influence over the direction that Spider-Man and comic book media has taken. This is something that came to mind in the wake of the most recent attempt to show off the Gwen story, a fan film that drew up a lot of controversy in the years leading up to its release. That was a film ultimately called Spider-Man Lotus, the passion project of a first-time filmmaker called Gavin Konop. As the thumbnail and title suggests, we're not actually going to spend very much time with Gavin today. The film is better known now for a parade of scandals that he and his two lead actors found themselves in within their comic book communities, and a channel I like a lot called the Cosmonaut Picture Show absolutely tore them a new one in a video I'm putting in the description. I highly recommend watching it. He's one of my favorite channels. But what did happen? Sort of the strange silver lining to Konop potentially destroying his entire career before it even began was greater attention being given to a film that had replicated exactly what Konop did, a full 31 years earlier, with a microfraction of that film's six-figure crowd-funded budget. A film meant to jumpstart its creator's career as a stuntman and have him work on the Spider-Man studio film with James Cameron, who was then attached to the project. That film is where we're going to explore for a little while today, as Konop's failure brought the light onto a $400 passion project filmed in the streets of Baltimore and released in 1992. Today, we're going to venture forth into the Green Goblin's last stand. It has to be noted that Gwen herself doesn't factor very much into Goblin's story, even if it is the most accurate depiction of the Amazing Spider-Man 121 to 122 by Jerry Conway, the original storyline that killed Gwen off in 1973. It's become probably the most adapted comic book storyline in all of comic book media, even if you've never read it before. And in full disclosure, I didn't read either issue until after seeing the film by Dan Poole. You've seen its influence somewhere in the mountain of Spider-Man content made since then. Now, the first on-screen death of a Spidey love interest since 1973 was not actually in a Sam Raimi film, but all the way back in 1996, which began the trend of Mary Jane Watson serving the exact same role that Gwen did in the early 1970s. Here, she seemingly dies in the 1990s animated series by being tossed through a portal instead of off a building. It does start a trend where Mary Jane survives the tosses that would otherwise kill Gwen, though Peter does mistakenly believe that she's died for a while. And it would take an entire year of the animated series before Mary Jane would return, alive and well. And if you've ever seen the first studio film directed by Sam Raimi in 2002, little-known classic art house film called Spider-Man, Mary Jane's near-death experience and the Goblin's death are almost perfect replicas of the comic. We'll come back to that later. Now, the actual Gwen Stacy makes her first film appearance in the third and final film in that series, this one. And also where this happens. Now dig on this. Where she's given her own drop off a building just like in 1973. But in that film, no supervillain is the cause, and Gwen fully survives the film, albeit serving only as a competitor with Mary Jane for Peter's affections. She makes it almost the entire way through the much less well-received Amazing Spider-Man attempted franchise, where she is finally killed off by a different Green Goblin in a desperate attempt for shock value. It was a move that was largely treated as a joke by most of its fan base, but it seems to be a bit more liked and accepted now by a new generation of fans. Even as her most recent appearances in the Spider-Verse films had a fully living Gwen who didn't have to be a damsel, it was invoked again in the MCU's No Way Home in 2021, where its version of MJ gets saved by the previous franchise's version of Peter in a deliberate nod to that film's ending.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay?
With the exception of those two films, a Gwen, until recently, was always meant to die. She became the architect of every fridged woman that followed her, every time a non-powered character would die to motivate some guy in spandex. Now, Gwen did not originate the trope outside of the comic book world. A woman dying to motivate a man has existed for as long as there have been stories, unfortunately, but her model is what every subsequent shock value death saw fit to draw from. Now, going back to our Goblin here, it was not completely ignored when it was first released in 1992. It is said that Stan Lee himself saw the film and even sent his praises to Dan Poole, the multi-hyphenate who wrote, directed, edited, and starred in the film as the Amazing Spider-Man himself. And Poole was just a regular guy from Baltimore who, as I said, dreamed of becoming a stuntman as a kid. He started the film fresh out of high school with no experience whatsoever. He barely had any money to work with. He worked at an aquarium and contracted family and friends to help him make his micro-budget calling card. Nor was it Poole's first attempt to make the first film version of Spider-Man on American soil. He'd already had various video shorts of himself floating around the home video circuit fighting folks like Mysterio and Bullseye, though only a few minutes of that footage remains compared to the nearly hour-long final installment in that particular series. Though he was said to have gotten a meeting with one of James Cameron's assistants, he never got to meet the director until he was long separated from the project. None of his attempts to get onto what would become Sam Raimi's films would ever work. Imagine creating the first live-action adaptation of a beloved comic character in the US and the right people to fully fund your vision just don't care. As far as the US of A is concerned, Poole's got that flag in the sand before anyone else that we know of. Nor was this even the first time the film got attention after its release. All the way back in 2000, he was able to get over 100,000 downloads of the film on a now dead site called Local Origination, one of the very early pre-viral successes of the internet era, albeit one that didn't net him or his crew a single dollar in profit. It feels full circle to have Konop's film become so vilified, albeit with millions of hate clicks to show for it, and to have Poole and his team be rediscovered again over 2 decades later. Now, a lot of stories I've read about this film before and after seeing it to share with you are unverified. One of the urban legends that I've read about but haven't been able to prove involves Sam Raimi using it as a reference to stage the third act of the 2002 film, the one we talked about before where Mary Jane is almost killed identically to how Gwen dies in the comics, and the Goblin is also impaled by his own glider. Comparing these two scenes to each other between Poole's and Raimi's versions, you can note some pretty basic similarities. There's a brutality in both, especially in Poole's, that the more sanitized future reboots just don't try to match. And I think that's what keeps drawing people back to this film over and over again in the waves, the way that they do. When this was first released, when Raimi's followed it exactly 10 years later, when Konop accidentally drew a new generation of viewers to it 21 years after that. Now, though the video I linked goes way more into it, one of the things that seems almost universally trashed about Lotus is just the sheer fakeness to everything about it. That might be unfair for a film made for a fraction of an MCU flick, but it also betrays how little money Konop really had to work with. Poole, with a fraction of that, did everything himself, at least with his small crew, and what comes with that is a sense of something strangely genuine. Poole just is somehow hamming it up so much that it just slides into feeling like sincere grief.
Ah! Shut your disgusting mouth, you burden! You've got no idea what it's like to love somebody, or to be loved, and then have someone taken from you! Taken forever!
See what I mean? Genuine might be a weird word to throw at a film where a couple of guys in Party City costumes spend almost an hour wailing on each other, but that's just the word that comes up for me whenever I've watched this again in preparation to share this with you. The word amateur is often thrown around as an insult a lot, especially in film spaces. That's amateur. That clearly didn't cost anything. This or that aspect is flawed. This doesn't look expensive. This performance isn't quite right. I mean, if you've ever created a creative project before with no budget, you've heard something like that directed at you, or heard it directed at someone else that you know. And all of that and more could be leveled at Poole. And in all fairness, this production was a horrifically difficult one, according to everyone on production.
How can you do that and fall into that little thing? Well, it's all I've got. You want to bring something bigger out here, I can fall in, I'll be happy to. But this is all I've got to work with. God damn it, I'm gonna work with it because I gotta get this done.
Here's a man who will single-handedly take on a production and not only make his vision a reality, but jump off of a building, get himself thrown around. I mean, beaten up.
If you fall off, I'll make sure I get it on tape, and if you don't get killed, we'll use it.
There's a million stories of directors putting their cast and crew through it for the sake of that elusive vision. And Poole is no exception. Even if he was the rare one to put himself through as much trouble as anyone else on set. The sanitized glossy sheen on Lotus, its naked attempts to be compared to the Disney films designed by committee and by algorithm, ultimately defeat any authentic portrayal of Spider-Man that it could have been. If Cosmonaut genuinely likes any of these characters, it's impossible to see in what he made. It comes off more like aiming for one of the most famous IPs possible for clout instead of genuinely giving a shit. And one almost wishes he just made an original project with that amount of crowd-funded money. And that's not to say that Goblin isn't anything more than a very faithful adaptation of the comic. It often replicates the dialogue of the two issues that Poole is adapting.
Spider-Man! Or should I say Mr. Parker? I have your girlfriend here, Spider-Man. I expect you know what that means. You tell me, Goblin. It's quite simple, web spinner. Your presence in this world has been nothing but a constant source of agony and disgust to me. I wish you to leave this world permanently, or else Gwen Stacy dies.
To Poole's credit, and to James Kinstle, who turns in a delightfully demented performance as the Goblin, both are able to take Conway's writing and make it sing.
Soon. I can sense it. Once he's dead, I'll be free. Free to conquer. To take what is rightfully mine! They think they can crush Norman Osborn with their petty finances? What are a few business reversals to a man of my power? In a few hours, the world will cringe before.
If anything, Poole unintentionally served as the final time that a particular kind of Spider-Man would make himself known. It doesn't mean that I don't value Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, Shabik Moore, Jake Johnson, Haley Steinfeld, and a ton of other actors, any more or less than Poole, but they are decidedly different. They are as different as Gwen is now. Hell, the most recent Gwen, Haley Steinfeld, proves this. Changed from a damsel in distress to a distinct hero in her own right. Spidey is just one more cog in that machine, one more wish fulfillment fantasy for a generation, one more figure that represents decades of dreams and anxieties. And so is Gwen. And maybe there can't be a Spider-Man without a Gwen struggling to live, and maybe there can't be a Gwen without a Spider-Man, someone for her to react to, someone for her to ultimately become a distinct figure compared to. Maybe Dan Poole and company were the final resting place for a Spider-Man and a Gwen we don't have any room for anymore. But maybe, sometimes, we like to drift back and take a look at once was our own Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's work and despair. Two guys in Halloween costumes, beating the crap out of each other, screaming like the damned. It's like Harmony Korine's Spider-Man, Spidey by way of Gummo. And that's the best possible compliment I can give to both of those films. Everyone involved moved on to other things. Poole never got to work with James Cameron like he dreamed of, but with the recent online screenings and interviews he's done in honor of the film's 30th anniversary, which was last year, he comes off like he's genuinely happy with how things turned out in the end. The cast and crew of this film have moved on to whatever they're doing with their lives now. And I would ask of you not to bother them now, if any of them happen to be watching this. I hope that they feel satisfied with how their work has been shown here. There is something real here, something that you will only get by watching it for yourself. And the really cool part is that you actually can. If you just go to YouTube, which you're watching this on, and you type in the name of the film we're talking about, you'll see it right there. It's got several 100,000 views, probably deserves more, honestly. It's something that Dan and company have clearly been cultivating and keeping alive for this amount of time, and you can watch it right now. Honestly, I think it's one of those films that is better whether you watch it before this or after this. It's not really a movie that can be spoiled, just one that has to be experienced. But like I said, there's something real here, something immaterial that I can't describe to you here. You just have to see it to know what I'm talking about. But I sincerely hope that everyone who was involved in this production is proud of what they've done. Because honestly, we all deserve to be proud of the art we create. I deserve to be proud of this, and you deserve to be proud of whatever it is you might be doing to express yourself creatively. Every single person involved in this production is an artist for as long as they live, and I hope that they all know that. And maybe one day, the designation of amateur will be a sign of pride rather than shame, because there should be no greater distinction than amateur. Amateur means that you're trying, even when things feel impossible. That is the greatest artistic achievement that someone can have for themselves. And Dan Poole did that. He may have gotten something far more valuable than all the rest of the Spider-Man creators as a result of that. And so did everyone else involved with him. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, talking about something that I hope you can see how much I care about. I hope to see you again soon.